The ambulance raced through London's afternoon traffic with its sirens wailing, every second crucial as Charlotte's condition remained dangerously unstable. Inside the cramped medical bay, James Morrison found himself in completely uncharted territory, not just geographically, as they sped toward a hospital that wasn't on any approved royal medical protocol, but emotionally and professionally as well. Paramedic Sarah Thompson worked with remarkable skill and composure, monitoring Charlotte's vital signs while administering medications to help stabilize her heart rhythm. The confined space of the ambulance forced James into closer proximity with the medical procedures than his training had ever anticipated, but he remained focused on providing comfort to the frightened young princess whose small hand hadn't released his grip since they left the charity center. "How are you feeling now, princess?" Sarah asked as she adjusted the oxygen mask that had been placed over Charlotte's nose and mouth. The clear plastic fogged slightly with each breath, but the regular pattern was reassuring evidence that her breathing was becoming more stable. Charlotte managed a small nod, her eyes still wide with fear, but showing more alertness than she had displayed in the consultation room. The medications were beginning to take effect, and the heart monitor's erratic beeping had settled into a more regular, though still concerning, rhythm. James's radio crackled with increasingly urgent communications from Kensington Palace. Word of Charlotte's medical emergency had reached the highest levels of the royal household, and the response was swift and comprehensive. The Prince and Princess of Wales were being rushed back from their engagements. The royal medical team had been activated, and the moment that would define James Morrison's career and challenge every protocol he had ever been taught began with a sound so subtle that only someone watching Charlotte as intently as he would have noticed it. It was a small gasp, barely audible, but it carried with it the weight of genuine distress. Charlotte had been sitting on the examination table in Dr. Chin's consultation room, listening politely as he explained the various monitoring devices used to track children's heart conditions. Her posture was still perfect, her attention focused, but James saw her hand move unconsciously to her chest, pressing gently as if trying to ease some internal pressure. "Dr. Chun," Charlotte said softly, her voice carrying a note of confusion that was entirely unlike her usual confident tone. "I'm feeling rather unusual. My chest feels tight, and everything seems to be happening very quickly." Dr. Chin's professional instincts kicked in immediately. He could see that Charlotte's condition was deteriorating rapidly. Her skin had taken on a pallor that was alarming in someone so young and healthy, and her breathing had become noticeably labored. Most concerning was the look of genuine fear that had appeared in her eyes. Charlotte had been trained from birth to maintain composure in all circumstances, and seeing that facade crack was deeply troubling. "Princess Charlotte, I need you to lie down for me," Dr. Chin said, his voice maintaining professional calm while his hands moved quickly to connect her to the heart monitoring equipment. "Sometimes when we're excited or have had a busy day, our hearts need a little extra attention." James stepped forward, abandoning his prescribed position to move closer to the examination table. Every instinct he had developed over 12 years of royal protection was screaming at him that this was no longer about maintaining professional distance. This was about protecting a child who was in genuine medical distress. The heart monitor's rhythmic beeping filled the room, but the pattern it displayed on the screen was erratic and concerning. Dr. Chin's expression grew more serious as he watched the readout, while Charlotte's breathing became increasingly rapid and shallow. Her eyes, wide with confusion and growing fear, sought out James's face as the one familiar presence in a suddenly frightening situation. "Sergeant Morrison," Charlotte whispered, her voice so quiet that he had to lean closer to hear her. "Something's wrong, isn't it? I can feel my heart beating so fast, and I feel dizzy." It was in that moment that James Morrison made a decision that would either save a young girl's life or end his military career. Rather than maintaining the professional distance that protocol demanded, he reached out and gently took Charlotte's hand in his, offering the comfort and reassurance that no royal regulation could provide. "I'm right here, princess," he said softly, his voice carrying none of the formal tone required by royal protocol. "Dr. Chun is taking excellent care of you, and we're going to make sure you're perfectly safe." Dr. Chun was already on the phone with the emergency services, his voice urgent, but controlled as he described Charlotte's symptoms to the cardiac specialist on call at Great Ormond Street Hospital. The words he used, arrhythmia, tachycardia, pediatric emergency, carried a gravity that made the room feel suddenly smaller and more intense. Charlotte's grip on James's hand tightened as another wave of symptoms washed over her. Her face had grown pale, and small beads of perspiration dotted her forehead despite the comfortable temperature in the room. Most alarmingly, her lips had begun to take on a slightly blue tinge, indicating that her body wasn't receiving adequate oxygen. "I'm scared," Charlotte whispered, the words spoken so quietly that only James could hear them. It was perhaps the first time in her 9 years of life that she had been allowed to express genuine fear, and the vulnerability in her voice broke something inside the hardened security officer. "It's okay to be scared," James replied, his thumb gently stroking the back of her small hand. "Even princesses are allowed to be scared sometimes. But you're the bravest person I know, and we're going to get through this together." Dr. Chin finished his call and returned to Charlotte's side, his professional demeanor intact but his eyes reflecting the gravity of the situation. "Princess Charlotte, we're going to take you to a hospital where they have special equipment to help your heart feel better. The ambulance is on its way, and we'll stay with you every step of the journey." Outside the consultation room, the charity event continued, with most attendees unaware that anything was amiss. Mrs. Williams had skillfully redirected the crowd's attention to the center's other facilities, while Miss Holmes discreetly contacted Kensington Palace to inform them of the developing situation. The challenge was managing the crisis without creating panic among the families present, many of whom had children with serious medical conditions themselves. As they waited for the ambulance, Charlotte's condition continued to fluctuate. The heart monitor showed dangerous spikes and irregularities that had Dr. Chen reaching for emergency medications from the consultation room's medical kit. Each beep of the monitor seemed to echo through the small space, marking time with an urgency that made every second feel like an hour. "Sergeant Morrison," Charlotte said, her voice weak, but still maintaining the polite formality that had been ingrained in her since birth. "Would you please tell my mother and father that I tried very hard to complete the visit properly? I don't want them to be disappointed that I couldn't finish meeting all the children." James felt his heart break at the maturity and selflessness displayed by this young girl who, even in the midst of a medical emergency, was worried about disappointing others and failing in her royal duties. It was a moment that crystallized everything he had come to admire about Charlotte during their 2 years together: her genuine care for others, her sense of duty, and her remarkable strength of character. "Princess," he said, his voice gentle but firm, "your parents could never be disappointed in you. You've brought joy to so many children today, and that's what matters. Your job right now is just to focus on getting better." The sound of sirens in the distance announced the arrival of the emergency medical team. Dr. Chun had specifically requested paramedics trained in pediatric cardiac emergencies, and the team that entered the consultation room moved with practiced efficiency. Their leader, paramedic Sarah Thompson, had years of experience dealing with childhood medical emergencies and immediately took control of the situation. "Hello, Princess Charlotte," Sarah said with warm professionalism as she began her assessment. "I'm Sarah, and we're going to take excellent care of you. Can you tell me how you're feeling right now?" Charlotte, despite her obvious distress, managed to provide clear and articulate answers to the paramedics' questions. She described the tightness in her chest, the racing sensation in her heart, and the dizziness that had been growing worse over the past few minutes. Her ability to communicate clearly despite her condition impressed the medical team and provided them with crucial information about her symptoms. As the paramedics prepared to transfer Charlotte to the ambulance, another crisis emerged. Royal protocol clearly stated that in medical emergencies, the royal family's private physicians must be contacted, and transfer should only be made to hospitals that had been pre-approved for royal treatment. However, Charlotte's condition was deteriorating too rapidly to wait for these protocols to be followed. James found himself facing an impossible choice. He could follow protocol and potentially delay Charlotte's treatment while the proper medical arrangements were made, or he could allow the paramedics to take her immediately to the nearest appropriate facility, Great Ormond Street Hospital, which, while not officially approved for emergency royal treatment, was universally recognized as one of the world's leading pediatric cardiac centers. "We need to go now," paramedic Thompson said urgently, her tone indicating that further delay could be dangerous. "Her condition is unstable, and we need to get her to a facility with pediatric cardiac specialists immediately." Charlotte's eyes found James's face as the paramedics prepared to move her to the stretcher. In that moment, he saw not a royal princess who needed to be protected according to established protocols, but a frightened little girl who needed someone to make the right decision for her well-being, regardless of the consequences. "We go to Great Ormond Street," James declared, his voice carrying the authority of his position, but also the weight of a decision that went against every protocol he had been taught. "Her safety is more important than procedure." As Charlotte was carefully moved to the ambulance stretcher, she maintained her grip on James's hand with surprising strength for someone so small and unwell. The paramedics worked around their joined hands as they secured her for transport, recognizing that the emotional comfort James was providing might be as important as any medical intervention at that moment. "Will you stay with me?" Charlotte asked as they wheeled her toward the ambulance, her voice small and scared in a way that reminded everyone present that beneath the royal title and perfect training was simply a 9-year-old girl facing a terrifying medical emergency. "I'll be right beside you the entire time," James promised, knowing that his answer violated every protocol about maintaining professional distance, but also knowing that it was the only response his conscience would allow. As the ambulance doors closed and the vehicle began its urgent journey through London traffic toward Great Ormond Street Hospital, James Morrison understood that he had crossed a line from which there would be no return. He had chosen human compassion over royal protocol, a child's welfare over his career security, and love over duty. In the coming hours, he would discover whether that choice had saved a life or destroyed his own future. But, in that moment, holding the hand of a frightened little girl, he knew with absolute certainty that he had made the only choice he could live with. The motorcade to the Little Hearts Foundation Community Center moved through London streets with the practiced precision of a ballet. James Morrison sat in the lead security vehicle, his eyes constantly scanning the crowds that had gathered along the route. Word had somehow leaked about Princess Charlotte's visit, and despite the palace's attempts to keep the engagement low-key, hundreds of well-wishers lined the streets, waving flags and holding homemade signs. Charlotte traveled in the second vehicle, a specially armored Bentley with bulletproof glass and run-flat tires. Through the secure radio system, James could hear her chatting excitedly with her private secretary, Miss Rebecca Holmes, about the children she would soon meet. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and even the normally reserved Miss Holmes seemed caught up in the princess's genuine joy at the prospect of bringing happiness to children facing medical challenges. The Little Hearts Foundation's new community center sat in a converted Victorian building in South London, its red brick facade freshly painted and decorated with colorful balloons and bunting. The organization had worked tirelessly to create a space where families dealing with childhood heart conditions could find support, resources, and, most importantly, hope. As the motorcade pulled through the security perimeter, James could see dozens of families waiting in the center's garden. Children of various ages, some in wheelchairs, others with visible medical devices, stood with their parents and siblings, all dressed in their finest clothes for this special occasion. The sight that struck James most powerfully was the absolute joy on their faces. For these families, royal visits weren't just ceremonial events, but genuine sources of inspiration and validation. Dr. Michael Chun, the Foundation's chief medical officer and a respected pediatric cardiologist, waited at the main entrance alongside Mrs. Patricia Williams, the center's director. Both had worked closely with the palace in planning Charlotte's visit, ensuring that every detail would be both meaningful and appropriate for the young princess. Charlotte stepped out of the vehicle with the grace that had been drilled into her since she could walk, her smile bright and genuine as she greeted Dr. Chun and Mrs. Williams. James positioned himself 3 steps behind, and, to her left, the standard protective formation for royal engagements. His trained eye swept the crowd continuously, noting exit points, potential threats, and the positions of his team members stationed throughout the venue. The first hour of the visit proceeded flawlessly. Charlotte toured the center's new play therapy room, where children could use art, music, and games to process their medical experiences. She spent time with individual families, asking thoughtful questions about their children's treatments and showing genuine interest in their stories. Her natural empathy and carefully trained social skills made each interaction feel personal and meaningful. In the center's new library, Charlotte read a story to a group of younger children, her clear voice bringing the characters to life as the children sat spellbound on colorful cushions around her feet. The book, The Brave Little Heart, had been specially chosen for its message about courage in the face of medical challenges. Watching her read, James found himself impressed once again by how naturally Charlotte connected with people, especially children. However, as the visit continued, James began to notice subtle changes in the princess's demeanor. During the story reading, she paused twice to take sips from her water bottle, unusual for someone with her level of training and composure. Her smile, while still bright, seemed to require more effort than usual, and he caught her briefly pressing her hand to her forehead when she thought no one was looking. The scheduled highlight of the visit was Charlotte's speech in the center's new community hall, where all the families, staff, and supporters had gathered. The hall had been decorated with artwork created by the children who would benefit from the center's services, and the atmosphere was electric with anticipation. Charlotte took her place at the small podium that had been adjusted to her height, her prepared speech cards arranged neatly before her. She began with the poise of someone far older than her 9 years, thanking everyone for their warm welcome and expressing her genuine admiration for the courage shown by the children and families present. "When I first learned about the Little Hearts Foundation," Charlotte said, her voice carrying clearly through the hall, "I was amazed by the strength I saw in every child I met. Each of you faces challenges that would test even the bravest adults, yet you do so with such grace and joy." James noticed that Charlotte's usual perfect posture seemed slightly off. She was gripping the podium's edges more tightly than necessary, and her breathing appeared slightly labored. Years of training told him something wasn't right, but protocol demanded that he remain in position unless there was a clear and immediate threat. As Charlotte continued her speech, sharing her hopes for the center and her commitment to supporting children with heart conditions, James made a decision that went against his training. He moved 2 steps closer to the podium, close enough to intervene quickly if needed. It was a minor breach of protocol, but his instincts were screaming that something was wrong. "The work done here represents the very best of human compassion," Charlotte continued, but her voice seemed to waver slightly. "When children face medical challenges, they need more than just medical care. They need hope, community, and the knowledge that they are not alone in their journey." The audience hung on every word, many parents wiping away tears at the maturity and genuine care evident in the young princess's remarks. Dr. Chen later said that it was one of the most moving speeches he had ever heard, made all the more powerful by Charlotte's obvious sincerity and the fact that she had written most of it herself. But James wasn't focused on the content of the speech anymore. He was watching Charlotte's physical condition with growing alarm. Her face had taken on a slightly flushed appearance, and he could see small beads of perspiration on her forehead despite the comfortable temperature in the hall. Most concerning was her breathing, which seemed to be becoming more rapid and shallow. Charlotte reached the conclusion of her speech, expressing her gratitude to everyone present and her excitement about following the center's future success. As she spoke the final words, "Together, we can ensure that every child with a heart condition knows they are loved, supported, and capable of achieving their dreams." Her voice carried the same warmth and conviction it had throughout the visit. The applause was thunderous, with many in the audience rising to their feet in recognition of the remarkable young woman before them. Charlotte smiled and acknowledged the applause with a graceful nod, but James could see that the effort was becoming increasingly difficult for her. As Charlotte stepped back from the podium, James made another decision that pushed the boundaries of protocol. Instead of maintaining his standard 3-step distance, he moved to within arm's reach of her. If anyone noticed the deviation, they would likely attribute it to the confined space and large crowd. But James knew he was positioning himself to act if his growing concerns proved justified. The final scheduled activity was a brief reception where Charlotte would have the opportunity to speak individually with some of the families. Tables had been set up with refreshments, and the atmosphere was festive and warm. Charlotte moved through the crowd with her usual grace, but James could see that each interaction was requiring more effort than it should. When Charlotte spoke with 8-year-old Emma Foster, a little girl who had recently undergone her third heart surgery, her genuine concern and empathy were evident to everyone present. Emma shyly presented Charlotte with a hand-drawn picture of a princess with a crown made of hearts, and Charlotte's delight at the gift was completely unfeigned. "This is absolutely beautiful, Emma," Charlotte said, kneeling down to Emma's eye level. "I shall treasure it always. You are such a talented artist." But, as Charlotte stood back up, James noticed her pause for just a moment, as if steadying herself. The conversation with Emma's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Foster, revealed Charlotte's remarkable grasp of medical terminology and treatment processes. She asked intelligent questions about Emma's recovery, her current activity levels, and her plans for the future. Her knowledge came from hours of preparation and genuine interest, but James could hear a slight breathlessness in her voice that hadn't been there an hour earlier. Dr. Chun approached Charlotte to introduce her to several other families, but James intercepted him with a subtle gesture. "Doctor," he said quietly, "I wonder if you might observe the princess for a moment." Professional curiosity. His words were carefully chosen to avoid alarming anyone while alerting a medical professional to his concerns. Dr. Chun, with the trained eye of someone who had spent decades working with children, immediately picked up on what James was seeing. Charlotte's color was indeed slightly off. Her breathing was more rapid than normal, and there was a quality to her movements that suggested she was working harder than she should be to maintain her composure. "Princess Charlotte," Dr. Chun said with professional smoothness, "I wonder if you might like to see our new medical consultation room? We've just installed some fascinating new equipment that helps us monitor children's heart health." It was a graceful way to get her to a private space where he could assess her condition more thoroughly. Charlotte agreed readily, as Dr. Chun had known she would. Her intellectual curiosity about medical matters was well known. As they made their way through the hall, James noticed that Charlotte's pace was slightly slower than usual, and she accepted Dr. Chin's offered arm with a grateful smile that suggested she needed the support more than she was letting on. The consultation room was modern and welcoming, designed to put young patients at ease. Dr. Chin's manner was perfectly professional as he suggested that Charlotte might like to experience what his young patients go through during their checkups. He presented it as an educational opportunity, but James recognized it for what it was, a medical assessment disguised as a demonstration. "If you'd like to sit here on the examination table," Dr. Chin said, "I can show you how we monitor heart rhythms and blood pressure. Many children are curious about the process, and understanding it helps reduce their anxiety." Charlotte settled herself on the examination table with her usual poise, but James noticed that she seemed grateful for the opportunity to sit down. Dr. Chin's examination was thorough but discreet, conducted under the guise of demonstrating the equipment's capabilities. He checked her pulse, blood pressure, and listened to her heart and lungs, all while maintaining the pretense that she was simply observing his techniques. What Dr. Chin discovered would change everything. Charlotte's heart rate was elevated well beyond what would be expected from the mild exertion of walking and speaking at a public event. Her blood pressure showed concerning readings, and when he listened to her heart, he detected an irregular rhythm that hadn't been present during her routine examination just hours earlier. "Princess Charlotte," Dr. Chun said with carefully controlled calm, "I think it would be wise for us to contact your family's medical team. Sometimes excitement and busy schedules can affect how we feel, and it's always best to be cautious." Charlotte, with the intelligence that had always impressed her tutors and advisors, seemed to understand that something was genuinely wrong. "Are you saying I'm unwell, Dr. Chun?" she asked, her voice small but still maintaining the perfect pronunciation and diction that had been drilled into her since childhood. It was at that moment, as Dr. Chun prepared to explain the situation and James reached for his secure communication device to contact the palace medical team. That Charlotte's condition took a dramatic turn for the worse. The carefully controlled concern of the previous few minutes was about to explode into a full medical emergency that would test every person present and ultimately lead to the complete abandonment of royal protocol in favor of human compassion and swift action. Staff Sergeant James Morrison had served the royal family for 12 years, and in all that time, he had never once questioned the wisdom of royal protocol. At 34 years old, he was considered one of the most reliable members of the Royal Protection Squad, a man whose military record spoke of unwavering dedication and absolute professionalism. His colleagues often joked that James had ice water in his veins, but they said it with respect. In their line of work, emotional detachment wasn't just preferred, it was essential. The morning of March 15, 2024, began like any other at Kensington Palace. James arrived at precisely 5:30 a.m. for his shift briefing, his uniform immaculate, his mind already focused on the day's security protocols. Princess Charlotte, now 9 years old, had a full schedule ahead. Morning lessons with her tutor, a brief public appearance at a children's charity event, and afternoon tea with her grandmother, the Princess of Wales. It was the kind of carefully orchestrated day that the royal family had perfected over generations. James had been assigned to Princess Charlotte's detail for the past 2 years, ever since her 7th birthday. He had watched her grow from a shy little girl who hid behind her mother's skirts to a confident young royal who charmed everyone she met. But protocol demanded that he maintain professional distance. He was her shadow, her silent protector, never her friend. The royal household staff moved with practiced efficiency that morning. Mrs. Eleanor Whitfield, the head housekeeper who had served 3 generations of royals, supervised the preparation of Charlotte's breakfast with the same attention to detail she had applied to state dinners. The kitchen staff, led by Chef Antoine Dubois, prepared the princess's favorite morning meal, fresh strawberries with cream, whole grain toast with honey, and hot chocolate made from Belgian chocolate specially imported for the royal children. Charlotte's morning routine was as precise as clockwork. She woke at 7 a.m. sharp, never needing an alarm. Her lady's maid, Sarah Jenkins, a kind woman in her 50s who had cared for Charlotte since she was a baby, helped her dress in the day's carefully selected outfit, a navy blue dress with white collar, matching tights, and polished black shoes. Every detail of her appearance was planned weeks in advance by her mother's styling team. James positioned himself outside Charlotte's private apartments as she prepared for the day. Through the slightly open door, he could hear her chatting animatedly with Sarah about the charity event they would attend later. Charlotte was excited about meeting other children and had spent the previous evening practicing a short speech she would deliver. Her genuine enthusiasm for helping others was one of the qualities that made her so beloved by both the public and the palace staff. At 8:15 a.m., Charlotte emerged from her apartments, her blonde hair styled in neat plaits, a bright smile lighting up her face. She acknowledged James with a polite nod, the extent of their permitted interaction, and made her way to the morning room where her tutor, Professor Margaret Thompson, was waiting with the day's lessons. Professor Thompson, a distinguished woman with graying hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, had been carefully selected for her ability to provide Charlotte with an excellent education while maintaining the privacy and security that royal life demanded. She had taught at Oxford before accepting the position as Charlotte's private tutor, and she took great pride in nurturing the young princess's quick mind and natural curiosity. The morning lessons covered history, mathematics, and French. Charlotte was particularly gifted in languages, already speaking fluent French and showing promise in Spanish and German. She absorbed knowledge like a sponge, asking thoughtful questions that often surprised even Professor Thompson. Her favorite subject was history, especially stories about her ancestors and the long line of British monarchs she would one day support as a senior working royal. James maintained his position in the corridor outside the morning room, close enough to respond to any threat, but far enough to give the princess privacy for her education. He could hear fragments of conversation through the door, Charlotte's clear voice reciting French vocabulary, Professor Thompson's gentle corrections, and the occasional burst of laughter when Charlotte made a particularly amusing mistake. At 10:30 a.m., There was a brief break for morning tea. Charlotte, displaying the perfect manners drilled into her since childhood, served herself and her tutor from a delicate china tea set, pouring with the confidence of someone who had been doing it for years. She chatted easily about her upcoming appearance at the charity event, expressing genuine excitement about the children she would meet. The charity, Little Hearts Foundation, provided support for children with congenital heart defects. Charlotte had specifically requested to support this cause after meeting a young girl with a heart condition during a previous royal engagement. Her mother, the Princess of Wales, had been impressed by Charlotte's compassion and had arranged for her daughter to become a patron of the organization, the youngest royal patron in modern history. As the morning progressed, James noticed something that would later seem significant. Charlotte appeared more energetic than usual, almost restless. During her French lesson, she seemed to have difficulty concentrating, fidgeting in her chair, and asking to visit the bathroom twice, unusual for a child known for her exceptional focus and politeness. When Professor Thompson asked if she was feeling well, Charlotte assured her that she was simply excited about the day ahead. At 11:45 a.m., Charlotte's lessons concluded, and she was scheduled for a brief rest before lunch and the afternoon's charity event. This was standard protocol for royal children. Their schedules were carefully managed to prevent exhaustion and ensure they remained fresh and engaging for public appearances. James escorted Charlotte back to her private apartments, where Sarah Jenkins was waiting to help her change into her outfit for the charity event. The dress had been specially designed by one of her mother's favorite designers, a pale pink creation with subtle floral embroidery that was both age-appropriate and suitable for the formal nature of a royal engagement. As Charlotte entered her apartments, she turned to James with an unusual request. "Sergeant Morrison," she said, her voice carrying the perfect diction taught by years of speech coaching. "Would you please ask Mrs. Whitfield if I might have an extra glass of water? I'm feeling rather thirsty today." James nodded professionally and relayed the request to Mrs. Whitfield, who immediately arranged for a crystal glass of filtered water to be brought to Charlotte's apartments. It was a small request, easily accommodated, but it would later take on great significance. Royal children were taught from an early age to manage their own basic needs and rarely made special requests unless something was genuinely wrong. The lunch that followed was a light affair: grilled salmon with vegetables and fresh fruit, prepared according to the nutritional guidelines established by the royal family's medical team. Charlotte ate with her usual good appetite, though James noticed she drank more water than usual and seemed to push her food around her plate more than she typically did. Dr. Patricia Hartwell, the royal family's physician, made her routine weekly visit during lunch. She spent 15 minutes with Charlotte, checking her general health and ensuring she was fit for the afternoon's public engagement. Dr. Hartwell, a woman in her early 60s with an impeccable reputation in pediatric medicine, had cared for Charlotte since birth and knew her patient's baseline health better than anyone. Everything appeared normal during the examination. Charlotte's vital signs were within normal ranges, her energy level seemed appropriate for a 9-year-old, and she showed no signs of illness. Dr. Hartwell cleared her for the afternoon's activities and reminded her to stay hydrated, especially given the warm spring weather London was experiencing. At 1:30 p.m., the final preparations for the charity event began. Charlotte's appearance was reviewed by her mother's private secretary. Her security detail was briefed on the venue and attendee list, and the vehicles were prepared for the short journey to the Little Hearts Foundation's new community center in South London. Charlotte's excitement was palpable as she reviewed her speech one final time with Professor Thompson. She had written most of it herself, with guidance on appropriate royal language and protocol. The speech was heartfelt and genuine, expressing her commitment to supporting children with heart conditions and her hope that the new community center would provide comfort and resources to families facing medical challenges. James reviewed the security arrangements one final time with his team. The charity event was considered low risk, with a carefully vetted guest list and multiple layers of security. The venue had been thoroughly inspected, the route had been planned with alternate options, and medical personnel would be present at the event as a standard precaution. As 2 p.m. approached, the scheduled departure time, Charlotte made her final appearance of the morning, now dressed in her pale pink dress with her hair styled in an elegant low bun adorned with a small diamond pin that had belonged to her great-grandmother. She looked every inch the young royal princess, poised and confident beyond her years. The household staff lined up in the main hallway to see her off, as was tradition for public engagements. Charlotte moved down the line, thanking each person individually for their service. A gesture of gratitude that her mother had taught her was essential to maintaining the respect and loyalty of those who dedicated their lives to royal service. Mrs. Whitfield curtsied deeply as Charlotte passed, and the princess paused to compliment the housekeeper on the beautiful flowers that had been arranged throughout the palace that morning. Chef Du Bois received praise for the delicious lunch, and Sarah Jenkins was thanked for her careful attention to Charlotte's appearance. James took his position as Charlotte approached the palace's main entrance, where a convoy of vehicles waited in the circular drive. The spring afternoon was beautiful, with clear skies and mild temperatures that promised a perfect day for the outdoor portions of the charity event. As Charlotte stepped into the bright March sunshine, she paused for a moment at the top of the palace steps, breathing deeply and smiling at the gathered household staff who had come to see her off. It was a picture-perfect moment, captured by the official royal photographer who documented such occasions for the family's private records. Nobody present that afternoon could have imagined that this would be the last normal moment of Charlotte's day, or that the next few hours would test every person present in ways they had never experienced. The perfect royal morning was about to give way to a crisis that would challenge everything the royal family thought they knew about duty, protocol, and the bonds between those who serve and those who are served. In the pristine halls of Kensington Palace, where every footstep echoes with centuries of tradition and every breath carries the weight of royal protocol, there exists an unspoken rule that has governed the British royal family for generations. Personal feelings must never interfere with duty. Royal guards, trained from their first day to remain stoic, invisible, and absolutely professional, are taught that the crown comes before everything, even life itself. But what happens when a decorated royal guard, sworn to protect with his life, watches a young princess collapse before his eyes? What happens when every rule, every protocol, every carefully constructed barrier between protector and protected crumbles in a single, terrifying moment? This is the true story of Staff Sergeant James Morrison, a man whose split-second decision to break every rule in the Royal Handbook would either save a life or end his military career forever. It's a story that reveals the human heart beating beneath the rigid exterior of royal duty, and the moment when love, whether paternal, protective, or simply human, refuses to be silenced by tradition. On a seemingly ordinary Tuesday morning in March 2024, as London awakened to the promise of spring, nobody could have predicted that the next few hours would challenge everything the royal family thought they knew about loyalty, duty, and the true meaning of protection.